Story 1. Whenever a child played with someone of the opposite gender and someone said, "Oh, who's your boyfriend or girlfriend?" it stopped me from speaking to girls until nearly high school. Story 2. Being overprotective as a parent or not listening to your children. Story 3. Discouraging children from asking questions is harmful. Yes, it can be annoying to hear a child ask why repeatedly, but I have met far too many adults who say they stopped asking questions because, as children, their parents silenced them or dismissed their curiosity. Inquisitive minds need to be encouraged and fostered. Story 4. Never showing up for events. I remember my parents did not come to most of my chorus concerts. It really hurt to see my classmates' families cheering them on while my parents were absent. I brought home one of my chorus program papers to show my parents and found it in the trash the next day. I was sad because I wanted to keep it, but seeing it in the trash made me not want it anymore. Edit. I love my parents and I do not blame them for not showing up. They are small business owners, and it was hard for them to find people who could work for them whenever I had concerts or other events. Still hurt, though. I am sorry that many of you went through similar experiences. Second edit. My mom is a clean freak. She will discard or move any stray papers lying around. She probably did not think much of it and might not have even realized what it was because she cannot read English well. It is her third language. After I told her, she apologized, so it is okay. I should add that my little sister and grandmother would come to the concerts, but my relationship with my grandmother is not great. It is just not the same as having your parents there, if that makes sense. Story 5. Tell them that family members who are mean to them or neglect them still love them. Story 6. Creating an environment in which you tell your child their feelings are not valid because they are different from yours, or because your child processes emotions differently than you do, harms them. Angrily telling your child they are too sensitive, dramatic, theatrical, or hormonal will damage them and encourage them to bottle up emotions to avoid upsetting you, leading to major communication problems. Constantly pushing an intelligent or self-motivated child to work harder and to do better sets them up to be a perfectionist, which can be incredibly damaging to their mental health in the long run. Story 7. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. I had never seen anything so delightful and could barely keep my hands off the little furball. 2 or 3 days later, I woke up, went into the room, and asked, "Where's the kitten?" My parents told me he had died, implying my roughhousing had killed him. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years. In fact, they had simply returned the kitten to the people they got it from. Story 8. Not having them do chores. My parents pushed me to be academic, so they doted on me hand and foot as a kid to make more room for study. When you are too young to know any better, you think it is a blessing. When I moved out to university, I did not really know how to clean, when to clean, what to clean with, how to wash clothes, or how to get them dry, and so on. The only things I could do were cook and binge drink. That is no way to bring up a child, and it's a steep learning curve doing all that for the first time in your early 20s. It sounds like a simple answer, but make sure every child does their fair share of chores. Story 9. Don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother, very kind to us. But when we were born, she stopped having friends, stopped working, and stayed home every day until I moved out in my early 20s. She was easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem. Anytime I made a mistake, and I made many, it felt as if my actions were a personal attack on her. In the last 5 years before I left, I did not think we had a single conversation that did not bring her to tears. I was not that difficult. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and sank into depression as a defense mechanism. She took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I am a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 10. Saying I don't care who started it is wrong. I grew up with friends whose siblings would target the one with the bad temper, provoke them into a rage, then cry and play victim when they got slapped. In this case, it does matter who started it. A parent has to make it clear that violence is not okay, but neither is provoking someone into violence. It does not matter that the provoked person never hit or kicked while their sibling did. They would never. have been hurt in the first place if the sibling had not encouraged the aggression. Children are clever and will find loopholes in their parents' rules. Parents need to be better and stop that kind of nonsense when it starts. If they do not, they will raise a manipulator and a scapegoat. The manipulator will use them and the scapegoat will resent them. It is a lose-lose situation because of a simple rule. Story 11. Not having a life of your own beyond being a parent. Your child is not responsible for your happiness. You are responsible for your own happiness. If you build your entire sense of self-worth around your child, there is a good chance your child will grow up resenting the pressure. You are also modeling codependent behavior for their future relationships. Story 12. It felt like they were saying any activity I enjoyed was annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. My sisters teased me about it, and my parents constantly told me to shut up. So I stopped singing. I must have been terrible, right? Now I sing only when I'm alone or jokingly with friends. What really broke me was when I visited everyone for the holidays and my sister said she was surprised I never pursued singing, since I had loved it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I would not scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. Teasing may be funny for those doing it, but it hurts the people being teased, especially when it comes from people who are supposed to love you. Story 13. Not stopping when a child says stop, whether it is teasing, tickling, or wrestling, teaches that boundaries do not matter. Children whose parents do not respect boundaries often become bullies because they learn not to respect other people's feelings. Story 14. Never telling your child that you were wrong and that you are sorry is damaging. That never happened with my father. He never once said he was sorry to me. He was human, and there were many times he should have apologized. My children have heard me apologize often. Story 15. They involved me in problems I had no control over. My parents felt the need to keep me informed about our pending foreclosure and argued in front of me about who was to blame when I was 10. What possible reason was there to share that with a child? I barely slept for months. I was convinced the police were going to burst in at midnight and throw us all outside. Story 16. Not following through on your promises is damaging. If you tell your child you will buy ice cream tomorrow hoping they will forget, and the next day when they ask and you say no, they will see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just an example. Someone else could explain this better. Story 17. Using them as props for jokes in public. Glad you got a kick out of it, Dad. Story 18. Realistically, that is helicopter parenting. Parents want to look out for their children and make sure they are not doing things they should not, but walking in without knocking damages the relationship. Even though a parent has a sense of privacy, the child may not and will feel paranoid about anyone entering their room without warning. The child will constantly wonder whether their parent will allow them to do something and whether the parent is okay with it. Story 19. Telling kids they have to finish their plate. Sometimes there's too much food. I overate for years and it took a lot of work to break the habit and lose the extra weight. Story 20. Staying in a toxic relationship for the sake of the children does not help. Separate, be good co-parents, and spend quality time with the children. Do not remain together and resent your lives while pretending it is for their benefit. Children notice your behavior. It is a terrible example to set. Story 21. Telling your child they are always a winner is well-intentioned, but it sets them up to be disappointed later when they learn that not everyone can win. Let them experience disappointment early and teach them it is okay. They will grow up better able to handle the stresses of life. Story 22. The saddest part of this question is that my mother did many things others consider harmful, such as not hugging, not praising me, and telling me to suck it up. One thing that would have helped me while growing up is this: do not be afraid to admit to your child when you are wrong or when you make a mistake. My parents went out of their way to justify any mistake and acted as if they were right no matter the situation. That gave me a confused view of right and wrong and of how to learn from mistakes, although my grandmother later helped fix that. It is a long story I do not want to get into now. Edit. Wow, 11,000 upvotes and a silver award on my first comment, and it relates to my difficult childhood. Thank you. On a serious note, I want to emphasize not only the advice itself but also the consequences of not following it. For example, my parents never congratulated me on good grades or on doing the right thing and so on. They would only say, "That is what you are supposed to do," or "You better keep it up." And they would threaten me if I did not meet their expectations. As an adult, I am intensely suspicious and, at the same time, anxious about people complimenting or congratulating me for anything I do. Story 23. I grew up in a strict Asian household. My parents enforced a policy that we should never wake them up. To this day, I get very anxious and refuse to wake people up for fear of being yelled at and locked in a closet. I am 22 years old. Story 24. Treating crying as if it is something only weak people do. My father in particular used to yell at me for crying. His yelling made me cry more and created a cycle. In high school, I tried to tell him that I might have anxiety after I had spoken to the school counselor, because my worried friends had made me go. He told me I was just a drama queen. I cannot tell him when I am anxious or stressed because he says others have it worse. Even now I am 21 and I have an appointment with a psychiatrist in a couple of weeks because I have been feeling very unwell, and I would never let my father know. I think I would rather die than let him know I have been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility that I have obsessive-compulsive disorder, because he would be so angry at me for being weak. The possibility does explain a lot and is actually comforting to me. Story 25. If someone close to your family dies, do not tell your children that they are just sleeping. Congratulations! You have just created a lifetime insomniac. Story 26. Do not force children to give physical affection when they do not want to. If Uncle Bob makes them uncomfortable, do not make them hug him. If Aunt Karen makes them uncomfortable, do not make them kiss her. It is important to teach kindness, but do not teach children that others' feelings are more important than their bodily autonomy. Story 27. Never saying sorry to your kids can build up resentment. My mother only recently began apologizing when she gets worked up. That built up so much resentment over the years and made it harder for me to apologize as well. Tell your children you are sorry, especially if you overreacted to something they did. Story 28. Failing to give them a factual and straightforward sex education talk is harmful. My parents answered my questions truthfully and at an age-appropriate level throughout my childhood, and I am extremely thankful for it. Others around me have clearly not been that lucky. Story 29. In my experience, my parents cannot keep a conversation light and positive. For example, if I mentioned getting an A on a test at the dinner table, within minutes the conversation would become tense, focusing on another class I should be doing better in or turning negative about a sibling. Why would I bother mentioning something if it only triggers a topic you regularly yell about? They also cannot postpone serious discussions. My parents never planned a sit-down to address a problem. Instead, they would spring it on me when I was trapped in a car with them, at the dinner table when I was least expecting it, or when I needed to be doing something else. Interjecting important conversations into everyday life gave me anxiety and made it impossible to relax around them. This may be part of a larger problem. They do not maintain healthy boundaries. They do not acknowledge that their children are separate people with different perspectives. If I lived in a way that disappointed them, they would let it consume decades of their lives because they are so intertwined in other people's business. They would never give their adult children the courtesy of a coffee or lunch to discuss a major issue. Instead, they would blurt it out at the wrong time. They lack emotional intelligence and are the most judgmental people I have ever met. Story 30. Adults mock and laugh at one another all the time, but children who have not been immersed in the underlying cruelty of our culture do not understand that this is simply the language people use, not a sign that they are personally unworthy of respect. Story 31. I have a few examples. 1. Assuming they will lie whenever they speak. 2. Telling them they are being dramatic when they are actually upset. 3. Accusing them of being manipulative when they show emotions, for example, tears. Story 32. People always assume the oldest child is to blame for everything. Story 33. Failing to create a safe space for your children to share secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mother about my first boyfriend. Instead of talking me through it calmly, she brought my father into the conversation. They both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. Story 34. Giving in to your children's wants and desires without maintaining discipline and enforcing consequences will create a much larger uphill battle for them later. I say this because my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I did not want to do. For example, when I started getting bad grades because I was not doing my homework, my parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I completely love and adore my parents. Who is to say that if they had disciplined me more, I would have turned out any differently? Probably not, but you never know. When I have children, I already know a few things I would do differently. Story 35. Saying, "Oh, look who finally decided to join us," when your child comes out of their room while guests are over can encourage social anxiety. Story 36. Not signing the permission slip and missing those trips can be hurtful and make the child feel partially marginalized, since more often than not the trip becomes a recurring topic. Story 37. Telling your daughter that if a boy is mean to her, it is because he likes her. Story 38. Most of these responses are seemingly harmless. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child for doing something they already enjoy. For example, reading. If a child simply enjoys reading, let them read without a reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that activity, their intrinsic motivation is replaced. This is called the overjustification effect. Story 39. I found that when my parents teased me about things I was clearly uncomfortable with, I told them less as I grew older. I have a good relationship with them, but I do not share much of my life because it is easier if they do not know or tease me. Story 40. If you qualify for food stamps, take the fucking food stamps. Do not make your child live on macaroni and cheese made with water because we do not take handouts. Story 41. Do not make constant remarks about a child's body, such as telling them they need to lose or gain weight or commenting on their body type. This applies to everyone in the family. Such comments increase the risk that a child will develop an eating disorder later in life. Story 42. My parents did not allow me freedoms such as going out with friends or making my own friends. I am 17 and only now getting friends outside of school. I was never allowed to do anything as a child. I know my parents were caring, but it has hurt me in the long run and caused significant social anxiety. Story 43. Not congratulating your child when they achieve something can harm their self-esteem. A friend of mine never received any praise from his parents while growing up and always felt that he was not good enough. Show the child that their hard work does not go unnoticed. Thank you, strangers, for the gold and silver. Cripes. Story 44. It caused issues with food. When I was growing up, my mom called me fat and put me on all kinds of diets, starting when I was 6 years old. I would go to the neighbor's house and beg for something to eat because I was starving. Now that I am an adult, I hide food from my significant other, and I just hate that I do that. Story 45. Hovering over your child is more than helicopter parenting, which often crosses the line into abuse. It includes demeaning their choices, trying to steer them toward a specific career path, and forcing them into programs or sports they do not enjoy. Story 46. Not taking your child seriously when they talk about their problems and repeatedly saying "I have had it worse" is a good way to ensure they never want to speak to you about anything again. Story 47. Big boys do not cry. This harmless saying actually causes men to become shut off from their emotions as they age, making them unable to form strong emotional bonds. They can get past it, but it is a rough road. Story 48. Consider this: making finances a taboo subject. Financial illiteracy can be devastating in adulthood. Want to keep your children from repeating your money mistakes? Do not be too proud to teach them what your mistakes were. Oh my goodness. I have never been gifted gold. Thank you, stranger. To clarify, I do not mean robbing your children of their innocence by placing the burden of your debt on them at an early age. Rather, teach them how to budget the money they earn, how to build savings, what credit is, and how to manage it responsibly, including credit utilization, the danger of revolving balances, and not using credit as an emergency fund. Teach them about predatory interest rates and the true cost of a loan, and set realistic expectations for the cost of living and related expenses. Story 49. Telling children they are smart can be harmful. I am not saying do not praise them for a job well done, but repeatedly telling a child they are smart may teach the child that they do not need to try as hard to learn. Education should be a constant challenge in the same way exercise should be. If it is not difficult, you are not learning. Story 50. Being told not to cry or to suck it up messed me up for a good while. The only thing I learned from this comment is that you all have some shit parents. I hope you have grown since then. Stay strong. Story 51. This will probably be buried in the comments, but it is so important to me that I am writing it anyway. My parents unconsciously taught me to value external validation over everything else, and it has been the cause of persistent depression in my adult life. Examples that seem innocent: praising good grades and emphasizing academic achievement, being inordinately pleased when others praised me to them, encouraging me to apply for awards and scholarships, then boasting to others about my achievements, displaying newspaper articles and certificates about me all over the house, writing Christmas letters that listed my accomplishments, telling me I could do or be anything, that I was exceptional. This taught me that I am only worth what I can do and only as valuable as others deem me to be. Outwardly, I appear poised, accomplished, and successful. Inwardly, I have an exceedingly low, virtually non-existent sense of self-worth. I push myself constantly to do more, achieve more, and earn more accolades. I burn out and have panic attacks. I feel numb inside. I do not know who I am or what I actually enjoy because I was groomed only to do what others wanted of me. I am almost 40 and feel completely lost. Story 52. This is serious. I carry deep regrets about this. My children were deeply wounded by my failure to properly memorialize the deaths of their sisters. We had 2 normal children. Then my wife became pregnant and had 2 babies as a very late-term miscarriage. I held them. They were small. Charity's birthday is in 2 days. Hannah was born October 10th. We thought we did all the right things. We took their cremated remains and, with our children, placed one in the sea and another in a friend's lake. We talked about the loss occasionally, but we did not do many tangible things we could have. Memorialized their birthdays, made Christmas ornaments for them, things children can grasp. Both of my children grieved those losses deeply. They were 4 and 5 and we thought they barely understood, but we were wrong. That failure wounded them, and a couple of years ago they exploded with anger and hurt. We handled it as best we could, got counseling, apologized, and began correcting course. Right now, neither of them speaks to us. They cannot seem to forgive us for not properly memorializing their sisters, and it is tearing us apart. We were so close, and now they are distant and act so incredibly injured. My wife and I are professionals in a related field, and we cannot fully grasp the depths of this loss from either a professional or a personal perspective. Include your children in these hurts and losses. That is my deepest regret as a parent. Update. Thank you for all the comments. I mean that, since it is just a couple of days until Charity's birthday, she would have been 16. My wife and I are very sad, especially because we want to respond to our children's criticism of our past neglect. They are 19 and 21 and away at college, and now they will not allow us to have that conversation, which is frustrating. On Thursday, I am going to have flowers delivered to my daughter to tell her I love her and that it is okay to be sad today. I do not yet know exactly what I am sending my son, but I will figure out something with a similar message. My wife will get flowers and a lot of hugs. Part of what I have learned from this, and from some of your comments, is clearer to me. Love and loss go together. You cannot separate them. Story 53. Continuing to tickle your children after they ask you to stop is wrong. My father and older brother tickled me as a child until I wet my pants, despite my begging them to stop. It started as early as I can remember and did not stop until I was about 10. I laughed because it tickled, not because I liked it, and I meant it when I told them no, but they kept going. I now hate being tickled and have serious problems saying no when I am uncomfortable and maintaining my physical boundaries. Teach your children that their words are powerful. When they say no, even playfully, listen to them. Story 54. It is often more subtle things than you think that can have unexpected and lasting effects. As a child, I was ahead of my class and my parents praised my high marks. I never studied to earn them, and I did this naturally and without effort through primary school and much of high school. It was not until the end of high school and the start of university that I began to see the effects. I had never learned to study properly or how to apply effort to get results. This affected my grades. The straight A grades I used to have fell to C and D grades. I had to teach myself to study properly to reach B grades again. It also turned me into a harmful kind of perfectionist. If I could not do something perfectly and receive praise for it, I would not bother trying. That has been my biggest struggle throughout my life. Story 55. Physical punishment and intense anger toward children are harmful. My 4-year-old brother is having trouble becoming fully potty trained. My father responds by spanking him after accidents and yelling at him while he is on the toilet to frighten him into using it. This is traumatizing my brother and making it harder for him to use the restroom. When I try to discuss this with my father, he reacts angrily and does not acknowledge that this is my area of study, developmental psychology. Story 56. Flexes fingers. Being overly rigid about table manners, to the point of physically correcting how your 19-year-old child holds a fork after about age 12. Timing your children's meals and taking their plates away if they go over time. Mocking them for not knowing how to eat unfamiliar foods correctly. This can contribute to eating disorders. Spending more time dwelling on how evil and wrong premarital sex, dating, and gay people are than on saying you are my child and I love you is a good way to guarantee your son is having sex with his girlfriend, who fortunately knows more about safe sex than he does because you never taught him. That one daughter has a girlfriend, another is dating someone older than you are, and they all plan to get married within the next 5 years without inviting or informing you. Using anything they tell you confidentially against them ensures your kids will never trust you or anyone with personal information. Making a big deal out of them displaying behavior you want. For example, "Oh wow, look everyone, Nina finally came out of her room. Wow, Nina, I bet that was really hard for you." By 16, Nina comes home only to sleep. Story 57. Invading our privacy or imposing excessive restrictions because you say it is for our own good or because you know more than we do is unacceptable. I understand it may be for a good reason, but you must let us be independent sometimes. Story 58. Let them choose their friends and figure out who is bad and who is good on their own. Story 59. Do not have children before you have worked on your own psychological issues. These issues will always be part of the relationship between you and your child. You cannot hide them. Become the person you want to be before having children. Story 60. Avoid making passive-aggressive comments when your child has trouble leaving their room. Comments such as "look who decided to show up" will make them less likely to interact with you. Act naturally and let them join the conversation at their own pace. Story 61. Parents should not treat children as counselors or friends. Children do not need to know adult matters. Story 62. Not letting children fail or deal with their own problems. 1. If the consequences happen because they did not make the right choices, they need to understand the cause and effect relationship. 2. If the issue is simply out of their control, help them understand that some things are beyond their control. Do not create entitlement where there was simple acceptance. 3. At minimum, allow failure to teach them that failure is acceptable. Failure is not the end of the world. It is a stumbling block, and they are capable of overcoming it. You can help and support them along the way. In my role as an educator, I have seen too many lawnmower parents and how that behavior leads children toward ignorance, entitlement, or perfectionism. Story 63. Never tell them to defend themselves against bullies or to just be nice or to just ignore it and expect it will stop. Story 64. You are treating your teenage daughter like a pregnancy liability, babe. Story 65. Being too strict. Children may learn to avoid getting caught rather than to avoid harmful behavior. Dismissing children when they say they cannot sleep, and telling them that lying still in bed will make them sleep. Forcing children to do activities such as reading or sports. They will associate those activities with obligation rather than enjoyment, making it less likely they will take an interest later in life. Forcing children to attend religious services. This is likely to backfire. spoiling children and overprotecting them from the outside world. Story 66. Trying to solve your kids' attention problems by scolding them for not doing their homework, even though they have been sitting in front of it for hours, only ever lowered my self-esteem instead of solving any problems, and it still affects me today. Story 67. My mother yelled at me constantly while I was growing up. I learned subtle, harmful lessons and later struggled with anxiety because of it. Story 68. Downplaying things that are bothering your kids. It was something my parents did out of love and to help. If I was upset, I would tell them I was having trouble with something, and they would try to lighten it by saying there was no reason to struggle. It was all fine and totally easy to handle if I just did X, Y, and Z. That was their response to every problem. Whether I was sad about fights with friends, worried about the future, or frustrated by trouble in school. I was much later diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They wanted me to feel better and be encouraged, but I later realized it gave me the impression that having negative feelings meant I was at fault for not looking at things the right way. I bottled things up and tried to force positivity, which caused me distress for a while until I learned to accept normal negative feelings without guilt. I wish they had offered understanding first and said, "It makes sense that you are feeling badly about this. It is a hard situation," and then offered solutions and encouragement. Story 69. Breaking threats and promises. If you tell a child they are not going to Disneyland unless they stop misbehaving, be prepared to cancel those plans. Most children quickly realize you are lying and will behave worse in the future. If you promise a child ice cream for doing well in school, follow through and get them some ice cream. Story 70. Is it only me who is reading these comments and realizing that they are messed up in too many ways? Story 71. Claiming to be trying to teach them a lesson while actually cruelly punishing or criticizing a child under the guise of doing them a kindness. My parents call me a bitch and other insults, and they criticize my every behavior after outings or social gatherings. This has resulted in a deep-seated self-hatred complex, and I plan to end contact with them once I am no longer financially dependent. They would also yell at me and my siblings in front of company to make sure everyone knew how awful we were. They go from trying to be our best friends 1 minute to spending hours yelling or lecturing us for minor mistakes. When the only people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who make you feel the worst about yourself, it destroys your sense of how you deserve to be treated. I stayed in an emotionally abusive relationship for months because I was used to that treatment by my parents and genuinely thought it was normal. It took direct intervention from my best friends to wake me up and see the truth. No one deserves to be verbally abused by their parents under the guise of helping. It helps no one and only harms those who receive it. Story 72. I have not seen this before. Parents bending over backwards to help and support one child, but not explaining what is happening to the other child. This occurs in families where one child is diagnosed with a disorder or disease during early childhood rather than as an infant. It makes sense from a parenting standpoint to say we are all working together to take care of the child with the condition, but that explanation does not make sense to the other children. Story 73. Anyone who is a parent or hopes to be a parent, please never tell your child, "I would be so sad if you turned out to be gay, lesbian, or transgender." I came out to my family this year. I am 21. My mother cried and said she did not feel like a good mother because I had not told her sooner and because I had told other people. She does not even remember saying that. I, on the other hand, will never forget it. I know this is not what anyone in the family wanted. I do not want to cast my mother completely in a negative light. Although coming out was difficult, she does love and accept me. However, this one comment, which she made when I was 13 or 14, greatly increased my fear of coming out to my parents. I thought it would make me a huge disappointment and an embarrassment. Story 74. I was helped too much as a kid. I have a lot of anxiety about failing because I never learned that failure is normal. I am also very uncomfortable making big life decisions or taking risks without asking my parents first, and they often do not know what is best for me. Story 75. When I was 17, I told my father that his divorce from my mother had hurt me deeply when I was 10. He laughed and told me to get over it. He is a social worker and grief counselor, and he still does not understand why we do not have a good relationship. Story 76. Something that is far too common is acting before understanding why a child did something. Many adults hold the unconscious misconception that children are evil by nature and must be sanctioned to remove that malice. If a child does something wrong, parents often assume the child acted deliberately and out of ill intent, and they punish the child to teach that such behavior will not be tolerated. Children do need boundaries, but in many cases they behave as they do because they have no other option. For example, a child may scream not out of malice but as the only way to set a boundary that parents have repeatedly crossed. The problem is a breakdown in family communication, not the child. Understand the real problem and work on your family's communication. Punishing a child is an easy response, but it is not a solution. Story 77. This might not be a major mistake, but it is something to think about. Growing up, I was blonde, blue-eyed, tall for my age, with all the curves you want. I was always called pretty and beautiful. My body self-image is strong. Even now, when I am overweight, I still swim in a swimsuit without any confidence issues. My sister is a brunette with brown eyes and buck teeth. She is also tall but tends to hunch a little. She rarely received the body-affirming feedback I got. She never gained the weight I did, but she still remains mostly covered up and unnecessarily hides her beautiful figure. Story 78. Not realizing I had an undiagnosed case of bipolar disorder seriously affected my self-confidence and led to depression, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.